Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by Ella Massal, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargeant. Let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we're going to be looking into how to discipline with empathy and how that is going to make a longer lasting impact on a child's behavior. We're joined today by clinical psychologist Susan Heitler, Ph.D. Now, a little background on Dr. Heitler. She is also the author of the Power of Two book and workbook, which aims to teach the skills for marriage success. Her most recent book is Prescription Without Pills, which aims to look into improving a well-being naturally. Now, thank you so much for joining, Dr. Heitler.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, one of the first questions we love to start off with is how you got into psychology and a lot of the work that you're doing today.
Well, originally, I remember a specific moment when I was at home, probably as a high schooler. My parents had invited someone over who was a social worker, a therapist who was a social worker. And I was very impressed with her. And I thought, what she does is what I want to do.
Okay. No, that's perfect. I love that. I love the connection between what you're seeing and the work that you want to sort of implement and add into your own life. So I love that. Now, to get to know you a little bit more, I know that we have one very important question to start off with to hopefully warm us up. So do you mind sharing what your favorite or even your most recent book is that you've read?
That I've read or that I've written? That I've read, there was a book called Getting to Yes, Y-E-S. Okay. It's not exactly recent. It was a book that I read when I was in graduate school. And it's a book that they said, brought down the old Soviet Union. Now, we're talking 50 years ago. At the same time, how could a little book bring down the Soviet Union? Gorbachev was the head at that point of the Soviet Union, which was this mammoth empire. He read that book and it said to him, decisions don't have to be made top down. They can be made collaboratively. We don't have to be despots who are tyrannically ruling everybody. We can cooperate with people. I liked the book, and I also resented the book because I'd been thinking a lot at that time about conflict resolution. When I read the book, I thought, darn, they got there before me. And that's okay. As it turned out, the ideas in that book needed changing because the ideas were good, but the wording was very business-like. Mm-hmm. He talked about positions and interests that lie behind positions. Those are words that you can't use with your kids. What is your position? Yeah. You can ask, what do you want to do? So I changed in my book, I modified the words for human, normal, loving interactions, ordinary day to day. The core ideas, though, are very similar. Getting to yes. Fisher and Uri, U-R-Y.
Perfect. So what is it about that book that's your favorite and made you want to rewrite it in terms of normal common understanding?
That's a tall question. It's an idea that's at the intersection between happiness and misery.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's
that
perfect.
Is, when a moment comes up that's a problem, I call it a bump. you're walking down the road of life and you hit a bump, you basically have 5 choices. You can get mad, you can get sad, you can get anxious. The 5th route is you can go get a drink and flee the situation. That's fight, fold, freeze, or flee. Or you can go the thumb route, which is the route that he talked about in Getting to Yes and that I talk about in all my books, which is shared problem solving, collaborative problem solving. Or if the problem is something just within you, gee, I want to do this, but I need to do that. You can think it through in a way that respects both sides and all the concerns. And that leads, when you solve problems in that way, you go back to the realm of well-being until you hit the next bump. So that enables you to live a life that's in well-being, or to have relationships that are positive, not going into anger and depression and anxiety and alcohol, whatever.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I definitely have to go and look that up and see a bit more about that book as well. Now, I hope
that's the core idea in the book, Prescriptions Without Pill.
Oh, perfect. And I definitely would love to hear more about that further into the show. Now, I hope you're all warmed up for even the harder hitting questions that we have for us going today.
Okay.
I know that everyone has a very different idea as to what parenting is to them and what it means to be a parent, either professionally or personally. Do you have a definition for parenting that you could share with us?
The word that comes to mind is caretaking. The more careful we are as we take care of our children, careful in terms of making sure that it's loving, not toxic. The more careful we are, the more our children go from being seeds to buds, to blossoms, and come out to be the full embodiment of who they were meant to be.
Oh, that's a great analogy. And I barely hear that one being mentioned when it comes to children. So thank you so much for sharing that. So what advice would you give to expectant parents who are going through that transition into parenthood?
A single piece of advice for expectant parents, just go on with your normal lives and try not to, as opposed to getting a whole lot of forward-looking thinking, what if, how can, da-da-da. Just concentrate on enjoying yourselves and each other. Now that you ask that question, there is one thing that's really important for expectant parents to do, and that's to make sure their current relationships and their current personal well-being are top-notch.
I think that is important advice.
Absolutely. The child feels the tension even in the womb. If there's anger, frustration, shouting in the room, an anxious mother, believe it or not, those feelings penetrate and get held by the infant in the womb even. And then, of course, all the more so as they're born and as they're growing. It's going back to flowers. Flowers thrive in an atmosphere of sunshine.
That is perfect. I think we sort of underestimate the power that the parent has in terms of not only sort of making the child know right from wrong, but also the difference between being happy and also being sad. So I think we sort of forget the importance of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, one of the
Absolutely.
most common conflicts that revolves is always a conflict between a parent and a child. Could you shed some light onto the typical disagreements that parents and children can normally have that you've probably seen throughout your work?
First of all, parents and children can disagree about anything and everything if their mentality is disagreeable. That is, if the energy that a parent is radiating because they feel bad or they're rushed or they're hungry or they're tired is negative. It takes a nothing to trigger that. Maybe the child didn't look up quickly enough from the game the child was playing, or anything can trigger it. So it's about the climate, the atmosphere within you, within the child, and between you and the child that probably is most critical in whether there's going to be conflict in the sense of fighting, or there's going to be cooperation, and better even than cooperation, positive vibes, a loving connection, smiles, affection, enjoying each other.
So is a parent sort of responsible for making sure that that's the environment that is available for the child?
I would say yes, in capital letters with an exclamation point.
Okay.
Up to a point.
Yeah.
The parent also has some responsibility for where the child goes to school, who the child finds for friends, some responsibility, but much more limited ability to impact those. Schools and friends have a huge impact on young people, as well as the parents. So we old folks or older folks don't control everything. We control a lot. So the more loving and positive we are with the children, the odds go up more and more that when they're out of the home, they'll bring with them that inner sunshine, which in turn brings sunshine from others.
So it's sort of parents doing it in a way where a child doesn't really notice that they're controlling or that they're being a little bit more protective.
Yes. The paradox is that on the one hand, the parent wants to enjoy the child, loves the child, and at the same time, the parent has to get the child to do something. Sometimes the child doesn't really want to do what the parent wants. That's where parenting skills make a huge difference.
Now, prior to some of your clients discussing with you in ways to build that positive relationship with their child, what are some of the common methods that you've seen them implement in order to manage the conflict on their own?
Oh, you mean the good ones or the bad ones?
It can be up to you as to what you want to share.
Well, the default for most parents, if things aren't going well, is their voice gets louder, shouting, dominating by radiating negative energy. And we have this mistaken idea that if I get louder, then they'll hear us. Oh, the problem was that I wasn't loud enough. We're not thinking that consciously. It's something within us believes that by getting mad, we get stronger and firmer and more effective. Well, the first parts are right. We get stronger and firmer. Do we get more effective? Maybe yes, maybe no. Or maybe we'll win the battle, but lose the war. Because shouting at kids invites them to feel resistant. There's a fundamental need to be autonomous. So when a parent or anyone tries to control, imposes their will by shouting, getting louder, getting mad, punishment, there's a natural resistance that's going to build up in the child.
Now, when we talk about parenting, there's always different ways of parenting. And I know there are some households where both parents have two completely different ways of parenting a child, and one is sometimes more lenient than the other. How can parents sort of strategize in terms of their communication as to best to deal with difficult situations that their children may go through, especially as they get older?
Well, a few things in there. Your question interested me a lot.
Okay.
Because I got thinking, what do we mean by parenting? Often what we mean by parenting is getting the children to do what we want them to do. Get dressed, get good grades at school. Different ages, it's different aspects of life that we want the kids to do. What we can easily forget is the most important job for parents is to pay attention to what we're radiating, what we're showing to the children. Are we showing interest? Are we listening when they're talking with us? Are we asking the next question? Are we enjoying them? So children need to feel seen, heard, and appreciated, liked. As of all that we're doing as parents, that is probably the single most important contribution. It's the sunshine again. Now, beyond that, you were asking about parenting in the sense of getting them to do what they don't want to do. Is that correct? Or not to do what we don't want them to do?
I think in terms of the question, I'm sort of referring to the parent versus parent sort of term of dealing with the conflict. So especially in terms of a parent-to-parent situation where one parent is a little bit harsher and one is a little bit more lenient, how can both of those parents really come together and sort of develop a technique in order to best manage the disciplining of a child or the conflict that may arise with a child?
There's always a risk that if, let's say, daddy was too harsh with the child, mommy will get too harsh with daddy. Not a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Better to deal with each other, in a sense, in the same way that works best with the children, which is get quieter rather than louder and talk about yourself rather than them. For instance, I was very uncomfortable that's called a when you, I was very uncomfortable, or either can come first. But it's a magic phrase. I felt very uncomfortable when you, and then you talk about it. So then you say, I grew up in a family where I had a very harsh father. And the result was that I hated him and I listened less and less to him. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering what would happen if you tried a different parenting style. How do you feel? So there's a few key sentence starters that can be very helpful. I feel with a one word like uncomfortable. That's number one. Mm-hmm. Number two is, my concern is, so I'm talking about me, that this is my concern, even though I'm referencing what he did. My concern is that when kids have a parent that's yelling at them, they develop a very bad sense of who they are. I would like to is a third sentence starter. Mm-hmm. I feel, and a feeling word with it, and my concern is, and then I would like to talk more with you about different parenting options, or maybe the two of us could go to a class and together get some exposure to some different ideas. And the fourth sentence starter, how would you feel about that? Questions are so important. Good questions begin with how and what, not are you, do you, did you. But how would you feel about that? Or what do you think about the two of us going to some parenting classes? Or maybe just I'll buy some books and either I can read to you the sections I like if you don't want to read, or you can read them to me, or let's learn together. I would love to be the kind of team with you that's learning all the time, especially when the kids are younger.
So not only is that conversation really toning down the argument and the yelling, but it's also getting both input of both parents rather than just saying, okay, this is how I feel and that's it.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you want to be sure that instead of getting adversarial, you get collaborative. Mm-hmm. So yelling, criticizing, they make immediate bumping heads. Look how much information is going to get into the other person if you're head bumping.
Yeah.
And by contrast, you want to be able to talk in a quiet, mutually respectful way. Then both people's ears stay open.
So how would that go in terms of the spaces that they have that discussion? Would that be behind closed doors away from the kids? Or would that be something to use as an example as to how sort of a lead by example situation where the children are able to see the parents sort of deal with confrontation in that way?
You're making me think. I think conversations about how to parent should be done privately.
Okay.
Conversations where there is a conflict. Gee, I'm really uncomfortable with the kids eating so many cookies. If parents can do that in a mutually respectful way, that would be lovely for the kids to witness.
Okay. So now there's a lot of points when he sort of goes into teaching children to resolve conflicts cooperatively as a big vital part of their development. I think we sort of suggested that right at the beginning. What are some key principles that you can sort of suggest to parents to sort of emphasize a healthy understanding on compromise, empathy, and a lot of the effective communication that sort of goes on in a household?
Number one, tone trumps everything. That means that teaching kids first by what you're modeling, and second, being explicit with them. Look, you'll get more of what you want by being nice. As soon as you get angry, yeah, you may get it, like I said earlier, in the moment you might get that particular game from your brother if you go and grab it or if you bonk him on the head. At the same time, in the long run, you'll lose a positive relationship with your brother. It's not a good idea. Let's find some other ways that you can get that game when you want it from your brother.
Mm-hmm.
And you teach them. For instance, you teach them to go, if your little brother is playing a game that you want, you go get another game and make it look really interesting. And then your little brother comes over and wants to play with that. And then, boom, you got the game you wanted. A little bit of cleverness goes a long way.
Okay.
Distraction goes a long way. Prevention goes a long way. Mm-hmm. By prevention, I mean, you maybe go and get a glass of orange juice and say, look, I have some orange juice here. Then the little brother comes and drinks some juice. He's happy. He's not only distracted from the game that he had, he's in a good mood because he just had some food.
Mm-hmm. So to sort of counter that argument in terms of the distraction element, can't that have sort of a long-term effect as to sort of the little brother not really believing it the next time that situation comes around or the next time the distraction comes in?
I've never seen the disbelief set in. It could. Okay. Mostly if kids or parents can use the same technique. Prevention and distraction, we're talking younger kids now, core discipline techniques, discipline in the sense of getting kids to do what they need to do and to stop doing what they should not be doing.
Mm-hmm. So
prevention and distraction.
Okay. So it's sort of not saying it outright. It's not saying, okay, I don't want you to do this, but it's sort of making another situation seem a bit more appealing than the current situation that they're in.
Right. That's not 100% of a rule. It's very helpful to have family rules. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
My daughter, with her boys when they were younger, used to say, her last name was Hirsch. Hirsch boys don't fight. And she would look stunned when they were fighting. Well, that's an example of rule setting. You need to tell them what to do and, in a sense, what not to do. She would look so surprised. Hirsch boys don't fight. You know what the outcome was?
What?
Those 4 boys are such close friends, and they don't fight. And they learned not just from what we don't do, but what we do do. What we do is we talk with each other. And what the parents do models that. So that it's a household where when there are differences, they talk with each other. How come you want that? Gee, you wanted to leave at 4 and I'd rather not leave until 6. We talk about what's my concerns, what's your concerns, and we come out with something that works for both of us.
I think one of the articles as well, I was looking into some of the work that you've done and sort of in proper research for today. And I found one article that really intrigued me, which is called 5 Tips for Being the Parent All Teens Would Love to Have.
Oh, I
And
wrote that a long time ago. That's fun. I'd forgotten about that.
That is such
Go
an
ahead.
exciting tip, sort of advice to give for parents, because the first one is be the dumbest one in the room. And that actually, like when I was thinking about it, that made so much sense to me, because instead of sort of saying, okay, you're the boss, it's my household, it's my house, it's sort of in a way allowing children to feel comfortable and other kids of like other friends of their kids to also feel comfortable without really knowing the rules, but also knowing, okay, the minute that the parent does step up and say something, that means they're actually serious. It's not like implementing such a negative experience of the household.
Yes, very much so. We're all tempted as parents to become authoritarian. Do it because I said. We want to become authorities. Authorities, in a kindly way, talk about what needs to be done. And then be the dumbest one in the room goes a step further. Instead of telling the children what to do, instead of, for instance, saying, you have to sit down and do your homework by 8:00 at night at the latest. Instead, you're the dumb one. You ask questions. Gee, what time would you have to start your homework if you really wanted to get it all done each night? Gee, if you had to start at 8:00, how would you remember to get up from whatever you were doing? And that's examples of being the dumbest one in the room, asking good questions.
I have had so many guests come onto the show. I've never had a guest that has recommended that to me in terms of a way that really makes sense and sort of delivers it in a way a child would want a parent to deliver it. But
And particularly a teenager, because teenagers are trying to become autonomous, differentiate from the parent. They don't want to be told what to do.
It's doing it from the child's perspective. Like when I heard you do that example saying, oh, what time would you have to start in order for it to be finished on time? My brain was like, that makes so much sense to me, because there's so much of an element of, okay, the parent is the boss. The parent has all the answers. The parent is going to tell me when to do my homework. Basically, the child doesn't have to lift a finger until the parent is yelling at them or nagging them to do the homework. So instead of like having that aspect of parenting, the child still has that autonomy, but the parents are still sneakily reminding them that, okay, this needs to get done. This still needs to get done.
Absolutely. The parent's job is to foster the child's becoming an adult, becoming independent. Every time you ask a question of the child, you're indirectly teaching them to think, to take responsibility, to problem solve rather than being passive when something isn't going well. I do want to add that I myself don't get credit for that principle. It's a psychologist or social worker, a therapist friend of mine who's Australian originally, actually. Lisa Kramer. That was her idea. Be the dumbest one in the room.
Well, I hope that is a great parenting technique that sort of passes on for generations, because that, if I was a teenager and I heard my parents phrase it that way, I probably would have paid more attention in school, I will be honest, and probably would have done my homework on time. And it probably would have changed a lot of what I decided for myself and what my parents decided for me, and sort of separated that a whole lot more.
Absolutely. There's another rule related to that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything a child can do for themselves, let them do it. So that starts very young and certainly gets stronger and stronger through the teenage years. So what you're doing is just giving that extra little ping of a starter by asking a question, and then they can take it from there, or multiple questions.
So if some of our listeners are listening and they have teenage kids, but they've been sort of disciplining them in some way prior to listening to the show, how would you suggest a parent sort of start implementing them on the teenagers and changing their parenting technique a little bit?
A good starter is to think about that word discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Discipline. What's the similar word as discipline? Oh, disciple. Okay. So if you think of your teenagers as your disciples, what would change? The word discipline, unfortunately, has taken on too many connotations of punishment, as opposed to, do we punish our disciples? No, we're teaching. So if we switch from a punishment model of discipline, that is, of getting kids to do what they need to do and to stop doing what they shouldn't do, and switch to a disciple idea, our whole attitude shifts. And with a shift in attitude comes a shift in what you do. Mm-hmm. So discipline is about teaching. It's not about punishing.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that a lot of parents sort of go into the way of punishment, such as, I know for me growing up, my biggest punishment was always sitting on the stool and just having to stay there, or being grounded and things like that, and missing out on certain opportunities, say a lot of extracurriculars that happened outside of school. There was one week where I wasn't allowed to attend them because I messed up in school or I got in trouble at school. So why do you think that we as parents resort to that sort of way of punishment?
Well, there's a tendency to do what's done to us, and there's also a naivete factor. I'm sure if your parents understood, if they knew better, they would do better. So it's important that your listeners know that there are much more effective ways to raise children than getting mad at them and punishing them. Okay. I've tried to follow my own advice. And so we did very little punishing of the children. That's not to say we never got mad at them. Sometimes, you're tired, you're rushed, whatever, and you just lose it. Okay, you lost it. Afterwards, go back, apologize, and say, let's talk over what happened and find a better way for next time. So then you undo the toxic part of the interaction and you invite the learning. That's what you're aiming for. Mm-hmm. I forgot what your question was. What was your question?
No, that was exactly the answer. So it's more about the child knowing that the parent can mess up at times as well, and knowing that that's how it can go, but also rectifying the situation and being an example as to how you can improve with each conversation.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Modeling what you're trying to teach them is so important. Getting mad is easy. Save it for emergencies. If your child is running out in the street, get mad, grab them, get physical, and pull them back. That's for an emergency. The rest of the time, if you step back and pause, think to yourself when you're getting angry as a parent, anger is a stop sign. I'm going to stop. And I'm going to think of a more clever way to handle this.
Mm-hmm. No, that's so sort of in contrast to that. When we're talking about empathetic discipline, and we've defined what it is a little bit earlier in the show. How does
What's the
that
term you use? Empathetic discipline?
empathetic
I like
discipline?
it. Yeah, I like
So
that.
in terms of what we've spoken about a little bit earlier in the show, which is dealing with empathetic discipline and sort of defining what that was earlier, how does that contribute to the long-term emotional side to a child, and sort of the benefits that that has on allowing the open conversation that sort of comes along with being a little bit empathetic, with knowing the child's situation or knowing where the child's coming from? I know that that will take a lot of hard work from the parent, especially because I think we're sort of ingrained as parents that, okay, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm the adult, you're the child. You have to do what I say. But how does empathetic discipline really change that approach to parenting?
Well, thinking about discipline in the idea of disciple
Mm-hmm.
already sets a totally different stance. The people who are at risk for being harsh with children are people who had parents who were harsh with them. So step one is probably to expose yourself to different parenting methods from the parenting methods you were raised with, if in fact you were raised with harsh parenting. So what do I mean by harsh parenting? Punishment, shouting. Those all send negative energy to the child. You're bad, criticism, blame. All of those send negative energy that the child internalizes. They may not remember the rules, but they remember, I'm a bad person. He doesn't like me. You don't want your child to get filled up with all that negative. You want them, it's like slinging mud at them and filling their inner being with mud. What you want to do, again, we're going back to the sunshine and the flowers, is fill them with positive energy. So the more you're listening to the children, you're smiling with children, even more so with children, with teenagers, you're asking questions, you're talking over with them. You can still set rules. It's for parents to set rules. At the same time, if they break the rules, you talk over with them. Hey, what was going on? Because Hirsch boys don't fight. How come you guys were fighting? Oh, I know. It's 4:00 and I forgot to give you a 3:00 snack. Let's all go get something to eat.
What about the idea of the pushover parent, sort of the parent that is not really taken seriously, especially if that parenting technique sort of comes in? There's a chance that a child may sort of take advantage of that and not really take all of the boundaries and all of the rules that are set in place seriously. Is it important to have that conversation a little bit more with the child in terms of what the expectations are?
Yes. We don't want to be authoritarian, that is a tyrant. We also don't want to be what you called a pushover. Psychologists call that collapsed hierarchy, where the child becomes the tyrant over the parent. That's not good. In between is authoritative parents. Authoritative parents do set rules and do talk with their kids about the rules and talk over if a child is not following the rules. What's going on? That's the model of disciple rather than punishment.
Okay. So it's just allowing constant communication and constant, I'm here for you. You can open up to me. You can tell me what's going on, rather than saying you're doing something wrong or, oh, it's okay if you mess up. So it's sort of in the balance between the two.
It's absolutely letting kids know if they're doing something that's not appropriate. It's also absolutely about setting rules. In our house, we do not hit. Children do not hit each other. Hitting is out of bounds. You can teach them, though, like kids learn the rules of sports. They learn that When they're on the baseball field and their teammate didn't do something right, you don't go up and punch your teammate. And there are rules in sports like what's in bounds. A soccer field has limits. If the ball goes out of bounds, play stops. So the idea of what's in bounds and what's out of bounds goes with being an authoritative parent, as opposed to being a disciplinarian. So the parent, in a sense, is more like the referee. Now, even a referee sometimes punishes in the sense that sometimes, I'm picturing hockey, ice hockey, sometimes you have to go into the penalty box and off the ice. So there is a rule of remove children from a situation they can't handle. That's different from punishment.
Okay, so it's
Removes
giving a lot of advice.
Absolutely. Advice in not you should do. There's advice giving and advice giving. It is setting rules. Brothers are not for punching. Hirsch boys talk over when they have differences instead of fighting about it. So there are simple rules. Chaim Ginott, Ginott. When I was raising my children, which, mind you, is many years ago, decades ago, still, his book, Between Parent and Child, was a #1 bestseller for a record number of months. He used to say, make up these little mantras like, brothers are not for fighting with. Brothers are for talking, and be sure you add the positive what is.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think especially in sort of allowing all children to sort of know the rules without one or the other having a little bit more freedom than the other. It's sort of a level playing field. It's like no one is allowed to hit each other. It's not saying calling out anyone's name. It's not saying one child more than the other. Even though there is that imbalance of, okay, this child is hitting the other child more than the other, it's not calling each of them out, which I think is such an important part as well.
Right. And being very careful about names. Yeah, Chaim Ginott was wonderful about that. We never give negative labels to our child. You're so stupid. You're so thoughtless. We don't do those. We give positive labels. Oh, that was so clever. And we talk about the behavior. That solution to the problem is so clever. Those are gems of advice that Chaim Ginott used to give. We talk about the behavior, not the child. And his other big influence, big emphasis, was on giving positive energy and minimal negative energy.
It still sounds so relevant for today's sort of element of raising a child because there's still so much connection there. Now, this slides us in really well to the practice and habit part of the show. Now, this is a practice that you would recommend parents do on a sort of frequent basis. So what is it that you would recommend for parents to build a positive relationship with their children?
One practice might be to either first thing when you wake up in the morning or before you go to sleep at night, think about your child in the best possible light and focus on what you really appreciate in that child.
Okay. What are 3 good things about that practice that you could recommend?
You're getting, it's very easy to get impatient and keep focusing on what's not good about the child. We get more of what we focus on. So if we're realizing, yes, he was very hyper today and difficult to deal with, and he's so clever, and he's sometimes so kind and so generous, then if the next day we focus on each of those moments when he's kind and generous, the child will do more and more being kind and generous. If what we're focusing on is what they did wrong or badly or provocatively, we'll actually get more of that.
And what is a challenge that this practice may sort of have for a parent? I'm going to go ahead and assume that they might not be a positive sort of statement that you could really think of for a child.
It's essential that they focus on what's good in the child. It's essential. So I'm very wary of, they won't be able to think of anything that's positive. That means there's something going on within them that they've latched into a negative view of the child. That can happen because sometimes a child begins reminding us of someone in our own past who is negative, a difficult parent or a difficult sibling. So we have to sort that out. If we're just hyper-focusing on the negatives, we'll figure out what's motivating that and make a change.
Okay.
Just promise yourself, wait, I'm going to let the negatives go for a while, and I'm just going to keep focusing on what Johnny does that's very nice. I'm going to enjoy him.
Oh, thank you so much for answering those questions. I know that you've got to go and enjoy the rest of your evening, but before you do, I would love to have you share something that you're passionate about, or maybe share some of the books that you have for us that you would love to maybe talk about a little bit in the last minute or so of the show.
Thank you. I'm passionate about peace in the world. Peace in the world begins at home. So the books I've written are Prescriptions Without Pills is for keeping inner peace, inner sense of well-being. So it talks about how to get rid of depression or anger or anxiety, as well as has chapters on how to interact with others in a collaborative way rather than a top-down, I'm going to make you. So it's somewhat relative to parenting and very relevant to parenting in terms of if you're in a happy, positive place, you'll naturally be more positive with your children. So that's Prescriptions Without Pills. That's my latest book, but the book that I wrote as a guidebook for how to have peace in the home, how to have consistently positive interactions, even when there are differences. That's the power of two. What I discovered was, while I set forth all the guidelines in the power of two, people need to practice. They need, in addition to understanding of how to interact, how to solve conflicts, how to talk in a way that sustains a positive vibe, they need to practice. So I wrote with my daughter a workbook. She also is a psychologist.
Oh, that's amazing. It sort of goes in the family.
I think so. Okay. So that's the power of two and the power of two workbook.
Perfect.
Thank you for asking about that.
No, I'd love to hear about it. So is that both of those books available on Amazon?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Now, thank you so much, Dr. Heitler, for joining me on the show today. If our audience would like to know a little bit more about you or find out a little bit more about your work, is there a place that I can send them to?
Sure. Send them to the website with the same name as this book, Prescriptions Without Pills.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
I will have the link down below for everyone who is wanting to know. Thank you so much again, Dr. Heitler, for joining me on the show today and for sharing a lot of the different tips and tricks that you hopefully will get a positive relationship with your child. I hope you guys learned as much as I did today, and I'll see you all in the next episode.
You've been listening to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by the Parenting Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel.
as it helps other people find it so that we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargeant. Thanks for tuning in.